Hey, this is Will, N50LA, and I'd like to bring you along on another Heathkit adventure. This one is going to be a little more challenging. I love working on the HW-101, and here are a few that are awaiting restoration. And then you've got the parts rigs. These are radios that are kind of beyond hope, that have been plundered and cannibalized. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to take one of these parts rigs and bring it back to life? This is one that I picked up on eBay for a song. It's a parts rig. It's been pretty heavily plundered, but it has some redeeming features, and I thought this would make a good candidate for resurrection. What are these qualities? Well, for one thing, this is one of the later versions of the 101, and you'll note that the resistors are carbon film resistors, not carbon comp. Actually, you'll find like there's a carbon comp, but the rest of them are carbon film. What does that matter? Well, it means that they are more durable and they stand the test of time a whole lot better than those carbon composition resistors. But look at the rest of it. I mean, the dial is cracked, the VFO is looking pretty bad. What's amazing about this parts rig is that it has a VFO at all. A lot of them are missing. It did come with a pair of finals. It didn't come with any other tubes. And I'll show you something else. It has a CW filter. That in itself is worth about 75 bucks. Now it's missing the crystal switchboard, which looks like this. This is one that I've plundered. There are 8 crystals on this thing, and I'm gonna need to find some more, but that's okay. And it's missing the rail that goes here at the bottom. But you know what? I think this thing might actually have some potential. That's kind of weird. Why'd they leave those leads sticking out? What are those? Oh, okay. I see. They had a little disaster here. Something burned up just under the bandpass filter. You see that? That's okay. We can fix that. So it's going to take some effort. It's going to take a new back panel too. Yuck. But I think it's a worthwhile project, and I'm going to do it. It also has both of its thumb switches. That's pretty rare. So first off, I'm going to remove all the knobs, get this thing ready for the sink scrub, because I'm not going to work on something this dirty, and it's really dirty. I'm also going to remove the VFO. That's going to entail taking out these 2 screws. There are 2 set screws on the shaft. I'm going to desolder these 3 wires, unplug this coax, and then these 4 nuts here, and then down in there, which are really hard to get to, which is why got to have one of these. I'm already seeing some new challenges where somebody snipped wires from the harness. I'm sure we'll find a way to get that. I wonder why they did that. That's weird. There it is. Oh, and check that out, a mud dauber's nest. One thing I'm very happy about is that the loading capacitor under there, if you can see it, it's not grinding. And if it was, and it meant having to remove all this, that would be a serious downer. But it's turning freely. I think this one is too. Yep, needs to be cleaned, but it's turning. It's not, the plates aren't rubbing. That's good. So I know I'm going to be removing these 2 paper electrolytic capacitors. I'm going to do that now before I wash it, just so I've got a cleaner board underneath. I'm also going to remove this crazy ass resistor. What the hell is that? A little hard to read that writing, but I believe that 2500 ohm resistor is a 20 watt resistor. I I think that's what that says right there. It looks like about the size of a 20-watt resistor. And tell you what, it tests almost perfect, but the circuit only calls for 7 watts. I'll probably put a 10 watt in there because that's what I've got on hand, but we do not need a 20-watt resistor there. Just for fun, I'm doing an ESR test on this paper capacitor, and wow, it tests great, but we never keep paper capacitors. You can see from the discoloration that there may be a little electrolytic fluid leaking out of there. Not sure, but I'm getting rid of it. The finals are 6146W. Don't see those every day. I do want to find out, by looking at the schematic, what might have happened there. My guess is that somebody had a problem with this rig. They weren't able to fix it and they gave up. But we're not going to give up. Here we go. I've got some brushes. I've got some soapy water. Just plain old Ajax dish detergent. Now, a good cleaning. And I'm going to really spend some time and attention on that mud dauber's nest. Nothing better for a job like this than a bent toothbrush. Now for the rest of it, I've just got an old paintbrush. The purpose here is just to get all the dirt out of there. The secret is making sure you get it really, really dry at the end. And so to do that, I'm going to put it in the oven on the lowest temperature, which on my oven is 170. Leave it in there for 30 minutes and turn off the oven and let it sit in there for another 30. Look at that. There it goes, 30 minutes. Hour later, I'm gonna put it out here in the hot Texas sun for the rest of the day. Okay, while I'm waiting for that, I'm gonna go ahead and strip the dial off the VFO and give this thing a good cleaning. It's not in bad shape. There's the old dial and there's a new one. That's basically what it looked like back in the day. This is the clutch, and these are spring washers. There's 3 of them that hold the clutch to this plate. They're very rusty, and I want to stop the rust because they're thin and I don't want to lose them. So I'm going to coat them in OSPHO. All it takes is just a little daub. A little bit on each side. In about an hour, I'm going to wipe it off. Prior to cleaning this VFO, I've taken it apart because I'm going to need to really clean out this Jackson drive. And so I've separated the housing, and now I'm going to have better access to the rest of it for the cleaning. I'm also going to check some of these resistors, just make sure they're all pretty much in spec, within 20% anyway. Clean and all put back together. I'm going to do a little bit of a modification here. I'm going to add a copper braid to ground this variable capacitor to the body of the VFO. And I'm going to glue this capacitor to the wall, which is suggested in the service bulletins. The reason for that is that this thing will twitch and it causes a distortion in the tuning. Okay, tie it off there. I've attached a solder lug there. I'm going to pull it through. I'm going to solder it here, here, and then I'm going to cut this and solder it to this tab right here. And what does that do? It improves the ground connection overall, which therefore improves VFO stability. New dial. Okay, 24 hours later, and we've got some really nice boards there. Didn't do such a good job on the front, but I'll take care of that later. I am itching to get into this area right in here. That means restoring the missing crystal switchboard. I have one from a parts rig. I looked high and low for these two missing crystals. I'm going to have to order them. This is where a restoration starts getting into bucks, when you don't have the parts and you got to order them to try to bring back a parts rig. But for this rig, I think it's going to be worth it. I have a feeling it's going to really perform well, knock wood. So before I install this here, I want to take care of any work I need to do here. One thing is I want to remove this carrier null pot. These are usually toast after about 50 years, so I'm going to replace that with a 20-turn pot and just see if there's anything else I need to do in this vicinity. Lots of surprises on this rig. With all this space, this is a good time to replace this 4-pin mic connector with a standard 2-pin Amphenol. Let's do that. Crystal switchboard is installed. The rail is installed. I do have a couple crystals I need to find, but these are easy to solder even when the board is in place like that. Now, it's really, really important to make sure that these switchboard shields are soldered to the copper comb bracket down there. Problem is, solder is really temperamental at those locations. It's hard to get the solder to stick, and what you end up with is something like this. You've soldered it and then it breaks away. So what I do, I take a piece of copper braid, fold it in half, and then I shove it into the gap like that. Then I solder it. Just kind of bridges the gap and gives the solder something to stick to. I'm on a search for anomalies, and I found this. That burned resistor goes directly to the tank coil. Right there. Let's look at the schematic. There it is on the schematic, R913. I don't know how it happened, but the rig was in transmit and current backed up through the tank coil, and this resistor was the point of least resistance, no pun intended, between the tank coil and this diode, and it blew. Don't know why. Could have been a one-time event, or if it happens again, I know I've got something else in the circuit I need to look for. We'll see what happens when I fire it up at the end. If I have issues, if it blows again, then I can try to track it down. I think I mentioned earlier that these are carbon film resistors. I'm going through and checking them one by one. Every one so far is perfect. In fact, some of them are within 1%. And the threshold is, for me, it's 15%. Anything over that, I'm going to get rid of it. These are great resistors. I'm not a fan of BNC antenna connections. I just don't like them. I like good old SO239. That's the kind we're used to seeing with the 4 screws. This is what I use. No screws involved. You just drill a hole, get that in there, and it's got immediate ground contact through the body of the socket. And well, there you have your ground lug right there. These are nice. They really look good on the back of a chassis, and they're a whole lot easier than dealing with all those screws. And there it is. Next thing I want to do is find any random wires that were disconnected, dress them, and reconnect them. I have no idea, for instance, why these filament voltage wires were disconnected. Why would they do that? Why would they disconnect these B+ wires, which go in the corner of that board? Possibly they wanted to be able to get the wire harness up. For what reason? I don't know. Just found another one. I don't know when I've seen so many burned resistors on one rig. I replaced it with a 1-watt resistor. You know, I'm starting to think this might have, where'd it go? This might have actually been a 1/4-watt resistor, which is why it fried. I don't know. Because it's not native to the rig, obviously one blew up before it, and this was put in to replace it, and it blew up. It taps into the positive end of the electrolytic there. There was a paper cap. This is the new cap that I replaced it with. So, I don't know, it's really hard to troubleshoot things when you don't know the circumstances surrounding the event. I'm just going to power it up later, and when resistors do start burning up, at that point I'll do some troubleshooting. This is the one I'm really curious about. The replacement did not burn up. The one that was in there originally burned up. Got about 20 screws missing. Why are these screws missing? Don't know. A lot of them are really rusty. I want to replace those too. Made a serious tactical mistake. I should have replaced screws when I had this board out. Always think ahead. One thing that's super important, it's not just getting the screw, the nut, and the lock washer. You also have to have a lock washer between the PC board and the chassis, right in there. That is what establishes the ground contact. The PC board does not sit directly against the chassis. All boards now screwed down tight. Next, installation of the VFO. While I've still got some room to work with, I'm going to replace this acrylic window. And I'm going to do it using my trusty dental pick. You can, these are one-way clips. They're really hard to get out the wrong way. And so what I do is I try to use the dental pick to spread the teeth, open them up, and then sometimes you can ease these things off. Those plastic posts, they do tend to break off. So if it snaps off, I'm just gonna have to glue it. Sometimes if you take your needle nose pliers and you try to squeeze down this way, you'll get it to do this. And then you can just slip it right off of there. And I got lucky. Got those clips off of there, preserved my plastic posts, and now I can put a new window on there. I got these off eBay. Let's look at these variable capacitors. I see that this one is not set flat against the board. You can tell that it's kind of pointing this way a little bit, so I'm going to need to reheat the pads on the board and get this one to line up a bit. But I don't like to see these rusty wheels. I can't get these off, and this one has a set screw. That set screw is set. That won't come off. So what I'm going to do is I've got some OSFO, and I'm going to just use a little OSFO on that wheel. That's just going to stop the rust. Sure is better than leaving it rusty. Time for the band switch shaft, which I got from a parts rig. Before I insert this, it's really important that each of the wafer switches is oriented in the right direction. Each one of these has a little notch, and the notch is either supposed to be pointed up or down, and that's noted by this little drawing on each of the switchboards. A little tricky getting these to fit inside each of the wafers. And I want to get it to where it's in, but I want to make sure there should be just enough sticking out for the knob. Then I'm gonna tighten this baby there. Remember these pulleys? Well, that's what OSFO will get you. Nice. This is the shaft for the final. It's not in bad shape, but I've got one that's a little better. I'm gonna shine it up with Brasso. It has a shaft that fits inside it, and these are always really sticky. So I'm going to clean that with contact cleaner, and then put just a couple drops of 3-in-1 oil down in there so that this thing turns nice and smooth. It's had some corrosion that wouldn't come off with Brasso, so I'm just using some really fine sandpaper. What happens is this just gives it a nice mirror-like finish, and I'll finish it up with Brasso. It's going to look great. The original one looked something like this, And that's what it looks like after just 5 minutes of cleanup. Beautiful. This is the pre-selector shaft with its rusty pulleys. There's the before view. I started sanding this by hand, and then I realized, you know what? Let's just do it this way. Makes it a lot easier to get into this skinny area right here, because you don't want to desolder these and have to try to get them back on there. They're really hard to solder in the first place. Whoever did them way back when did a good job. Just leave them. How about that? I'd say that's quite an improvement. Now the installation of the pre-selector belts. I like to use these fat belts. I think they grip better, and when you get to the end of the range, they hold on. They don't slip. Let me get that right in there. Look how that gleams. Look at both of them. Man, I'm proud of those shafts. It's too bad no one's ever going to see them, but I know they're there. Here are the original finals. I'm going to go ahead and clean these up. They're 6146W, which is non-standard, but I'm going to use them anyway, see if they work. It's going to be a while before I put this into transmit mode. But when that time comes, we'll see if they work. If they don't, I'll just pop in some new ones. I don't think I mentioned installing the VFO. It's in there, and wow, it tunes really nicely. And that's because I spent some time spraying out the bearings, greasing them up. It's really nice. Look at that. Just smooth. We have come to the moment of truth. Time to populate it with tubes that have been tested. And by the way, I did not test these finals yet. I will soon. But for now, I'm just itching to see what happens when it has its full complement of tubes and I apply power. And I know there will be smoke. I know it. I know there will be, but it's just a question of degree. Will there be smoke and sparks? Is it going to blow the power supply breaker? What's going to happen? That's part of the fun. Let's find out. Well, I got the tubes in, but I almost forgot something really important. I'm going to spray out that relay, both of the relays, and then just take a slip of paper. No sandpaper, just a plain old piece of bond paper, and just rub it between the contacts. Yeah, there's some grit, all right. Before we turn it on, let's go ahead and clean these wafer switches one more time. I say one more time, I don't think I've seen them. Bathing the rig does not clean the wafer switches worth a damn. You really got to just get some contact cleaner on there and just run it back and forth and back and forth. And then the mode switch, super important. The mic CW level pot. Gonna get both sides of it. Oh, it's crunchy. Yeah, this is gonna need a little work. I want to spray out the switches next, but I noticed I have not done some of my detail work. I need to replace all these rusty screws. For this one, I'm gonna aim my contact cleaner in through the side of the chassis. And then just run it back and forth. Oh, it's resisting. Oh yeah, there it goes. I do that with both of them. And then this CW SSB filter switches as well. That is the on and off switch and the AF gain pot. I am not thrilled with the condition of that. I could pop a new cover over that. That cover's not all that important, but it causes me to worry a little about what's inside. I'm going to spray it out. I may have to end up replacing it. Finally, I'm going to do the same with each of these control pots on the right rail. Look at that. Looks like a kind of rundown metropolis. The 11-pin socket looks like hell. I need to spray that down, get a toothbrush after it, and really get good contacts on each of those pins. That's a lot better. And by the way, if you have a Dremel, the sanding tip on a Dremel would come in handy for this. Power is attached, and I'm even going to optimistically attach the antenna, although I really don't think this thing is going to fire up right away. But it might happen. So here's what I'm looking for. Several things. I want to see, do my lights come on? That's going to tell me something about the filament voltage string. I'm going to have this on ALC. When I power it up, I want to see that meter peg and then slowly come back down. Does that happen? Yes or no? Do we have any kind of sound? If that happens, do we have any sound? Is there smoke? Does it explode? Are there flames? That kind of thing. So let's do it. That's a good start. Got my volume all the way up. Meter came down as it should. I do not have lights. Oh. Okay, I do have lights. Well, yeah. Okay, filament voltage is fine. I've got a hum through the speaker. So far, I don't see any smoke. When I turn the RF gain counterclockwise, it does what it should. Keep in mind, we do still have some crystals missing. I'm waiting on those to come in, but I do have a crystal for 14 megahertz, so that should be working. Well, anyway, I didn't really expect much more than this. In fact, this is a lot more than I expected. No smoke. The meter did what it should. At this point, I can just check that I've got good seating on all my tubes. Sometimes one poorly seated tube. Yes? Who was that? Oh, you. One poorly seated tube can make you think you've got all kinds of problems, and then suddenly, boom, audio comes blazing through. That's not going to happen today. Well, that's all right. What I'll do next is run some voltage checks and just, I'll check all my tubes, see if any of them are cold, and we'll go from there. It's right here. It's on this 6BN8. Got a bad contact there. What do you know? Here comes some audio. Okay, that's enough for one day. It's dark out. I need a beer. We're done. Consulting the circuit description, we see that the circuit runs from tube V10 to V11, V12, V3, V4, and so on. I'm going to start with those tubes. This is the receiver voltage chart, but if you've ever done or tried to do voltage readings under the RF board where tubes V10 and V11 are located, you'll find that you've got to deal with this thicket of switchboards. So what I do, I've got a chart that I made up for checking the voltages from the top of the board. You can get right in there next to each tube pin and get your readings there. Here on the IF board, the intermediate frequency board, I found where I should have positive voltages on tubes V3 and V4, and then also V13, the product detector. At these 3 points, I'm seeing negative voltage. I'm going to transfer this over to the X-ray view because here I can identify the pin numbers where these voltage irregularities are happening. And guess what? They're all happening on pin 1 of these tubes. I'm going to start at the beginning of this circuit. Sometimes the problem is at the end of the circuit, but in this case, let's start here. Pin 1 is the grid. This is the automatic volume control circuit. And it goes into the crystal filter here through this ceramic capacitor, and it also comes in through the relay. Let's have a look. That's pin 1, and already I see something wrong. This is that capacitor that goes to the crystal filter. Look at that. Let's reattach and see what happens. And there we are. I wonder what the hell reason there was for disconnecting that. No idea. Let's fire it up. One more time. Definitely got a live band, and that's really important. Oh. Is my antenna connected? Let's check overall band conditions, because I think there's just nothing going on in the band. There's digital at 074. There it is. Hey, we're receiving. Not a lot. An intermittent connection somewhere. That's weird. But hey, that's great too, because it works. Let the angels sing. There's a lot of noise to signal, i.e. there shouldn't be this much hiss. But hey, it's a beginning. Let's start with that and see if we can start fine-tuning it. One thing I should point out, I have not even started aligning this thing. So it has all kinds of hidden secrets that are going to come out during this process. But we have achieved step 1. I'm going to come back tomorrow and try to align it, and then get some knobs on it and see what happens when I try to go into transmit. Lord help us. That's usually where the real problems start. So it's daytime, next day, and I've definitely got better reception. But remember when I said that I need to align this thing? Check this out.
I think that's Terry, November 7 Bravo Delta Lima. Terry, is that you?
What a difference, huh? Can't wait to align this thing. In fact, I think I'm going to do it pretty quick. I do have 2 problems. One,
Terry, I'm pretty sure I heard you, Bravo Delta Lima. I know you are my lead.
this tube has to be seated just so, or else the light flickers and the tube goes out. Same with V12. So I'm going to just see how the light's flickering when I wiggle it. So I'm just going to have to tighten the socket pins and just make sure that doesn't become a recurring problem. But so far, I'm thrilled. Man, I'm happy. No smoke. Got good reception, nice and loud. Now that I've started tuning, aligning it.
Thank you for being there, and I'll see you at the top. This is Whiskey 5 Tango Echo Yankee with the time net taking general check-in.
One thing's been bothering me. Let's see if we can remove that and clean it up. I pulled the 100 PF mica with it, and I'm going to replace it only because it's taken some heat damage, and I don't know, I don't like to put old components back in. I'm going to try some acetone, see if that cleans it up. Quite a bit better. I think the resistor will cover that burn spot pretty well. Now that I know that the AF gain pot is okay, I'm going to go ahead and replace this rusty cap. I knew that would come in handy one day. You can see where some arcing took place. I'm going to go ahead and clean that up with a toothbrush. And, ooh, wow, hardcore arcing actually. Let's clean it. Might as well go ahead and clean the whole thing while we're in there. That is not doing a whole lot of good, because that arcing left a permanent mark. However, I think it's only cosmetic. The rest of it looks pretty good. While we're in there, let's be sure to clean out the loading capacitor under it. There's no telling what could be in there. Still having this problem with V12 and V13. Watch the tube light up when I just press it a little bit. I cleaned the tube socket out with contact cleaner and one of these brushes, and then I spread the pins of the tube just a little bit so that they have good solid contact with the tube socket. Looks like that did it. If that doesn't work, I would take a very sharp dental pick and I would stick it inside each one of these receptacles, and I would try to shrink that opening so that it grabs the tube pins better. The new crystals arrived, but first I want to check the existing crystals, and to do that I'm going to just use a plain old digital multimeter, put the black probe to chassis ground. The positive goes to the test point on the bandpass board. You can see on the other side of the board it says TP, and I'm going to be sure to press up against the copper trace so we have a good connection. And I'm going to do that for each band. I noticed that even though I do have a crystal for 80 meters, I'm not getting anything of note as far as voltage goes. That's bad. Now, that could just mean that I need to adjust the heterodyne oscillator coil. So I'm going to do that and see if the band comes alive. If not, I have a bad crystal. The 80 meter adjustment is on the top side of the board. Right there. So before I start suspecting the crystal, I'm going to just adjust that coil and see if I don't hear something on that band. I'm not getting anything at all. These crystals are close enough to the edge that you don't have to remove the board to get them out. You just heat up each pin, start in the back, work it out a little bit, go to this one, work it out a little, go back here, work it out, and it's out. Boom. Here's my replacement. I am going to resolder. I'm not going to use the old solder, but that's how easy it is. Okay, new crystals in. I'm on 80 meters. The rig is on, and I'm going to adjust heterodyne oscillator coil. And there we go. It's alive again. So according to the manual, I want to set the voltage on that coil for about -2. And then I can adjust it later during the alignment process. So there's 80 sounds good, 40's good, 20. Uh-oh. Where did 20 go? I don't hear anything. Oh, it's just the coil. So now 21. Oh, it's quiet too. Let's check that heterodyne oscillator coil. Let's see, we need to be adjusting the top one. I'm going to put this back on there when I'm all done, but slug is way out on the end. I don't think that's good. I bet it comes alive. Watch this. Tuning the coil didn't bring it back, so it's possible that uh-oh, listen to that. Uh-huh. Watch what happens when I touch that crystal. Suddenly I have voltage again. So many times, the problem is just a bad connection or an intermittent connection. If it's not the crystal, it could be a dirty spot on the wafer switch. It wasn't the crystal after all, it was just a dirty band switch connection. All bands are now operational, so I'm going to start the receiver alignment process. Well, I thought I was going to start aligning, and then I realized I've got mud in my tuning coils, so I'm going to have to spray them all out, let them dry. Look at that. Gross. All right, now we're ready to start aligning. Found 3 of these plugged up with mud or something. Don't know, but I replaced them, and now it's good to go. And for this, I'm just going to follow the manual step by step, making sure the driver pre-selector is at the exact spot it needs to be for that band, and then get a peek on the meter. Take a look at this 40 meter driver grid coil. Front end looks okay. You turn it around and it's like, it's just so impacted in there. What is that crap? This is that 40 meter driver grid coil. And after I cleaned it out, I noticed that this slug just goes right through. There's no resistance. So I'm going to try something. So I'm going to try some white glue, just a little bit right down the middle of that coil, just something to create some resistance. See if I can get that slug to actually do its job. May not work, but whatever, we'll see. Okay, got some white glue in there, and I'm just gonna spread it around up and down to give that slug something to grab onto. I don't know, I don't think that's gonna hurt anything, but I mean, isn't that what ham radio is all about, is experimentation? I just don't want to throw it away. Well, it's about 2 weeks later. I've been sick. I had a lot of repair jobs. I think I had 4 HW-101s come in that needed to be brought back to life. But I'm back, and I have cleaned my workspace. Isn't that nice? Gosh, you got to do this. You got to just take the half hour and put stuff away. It makes this process so much more fun. Anyway, I gave this lots of time to dry. That Elmer's glue is lining the inside of this, and the slug is just turning perfectly. So I'm going to reinstall right here. Okay, I'm in the alignment process, and that coil with the Elmer's glue is doing just fine. Time to get some knobs on here, and these knobs really, they're in bad shape. The aprons are all scratched. This one's not in the worst shape, except for that center metallic insert. So there's a guy online that actually makes these inserts. Put a drop of Elmer's glue once again, and then just drop that on there. I've aligned the rig, and amazingly enough, I do have RF out. That's amazing. I didn't think it would be that easy, but I've got other issues here. But even contact cleaner's not doing the trick on those. But the good news is that's just about full power. So that's enough to send me to bed happy tonight. And I'll get back on this in the morning and see if I can find out how to clean these crusty switches. I do indeed hope that that mode switch isn't cracked or something, because those are a beast to replace. I was checking my output there on 10 meters, and I don't hear anything. And I checked my voltage. I've got essentially no voltage. I should have like -1, -2. I've got -0.06. I adjusted the heterodyne oscillator coil, didn't get anything. So what that tells me, bad crystal. Let's go ahead and replace it. And there's my replacement from a parts rig. I'm just going to tack solder it so it doesn't fall out. Then I'm going to flip the rig counterclockwise 90 degrees so I can get a good solder on there. New crystal installed, and I'm going to turn the heterodyne oscillator coil and hope the band wakes up. And there it is. So on the RF board at tubes V7 and V10, these are the ground pins of the tube socket, and they should be soldered directly to this switchboard shield, which is then soldered to the cone bracket, which gives it a good grounded chassis. Well, look at this. It's not soldered. This one's not soldered either. Well, can't really tell from this angle, but it's also not soldered. And it was soldered at one time, but the solder connection broke. So I'm gonna fix that and then go to the other switchboard shield and do likewise. So there's what I did. I used my old friend copper braid to create a kind of intermediate contact between the ground lug of the tube socket and the switchboard shield. It's not pretty, but it is solid. I've been having really weird output on the bands, very inconsistent, and I noticed something. This driver grid board, I don't think the wafer switch is up to snuff, because I'll show you what happens when I put this into tune. Okay, looks good, huh? I'm gonna move the board just a little bit. See that? The contacts on that wafer switch, I've cleaned and cleaned and cleaned it, and I just think it's shot. That means I've got to take that board out and replace it, and man, what a pain, but let's do it. There's the new driver grid board. There's the old one. You know, I always dread having to install these things, and then it's never as bad as I think. Getting those bare wires into the board is a little bit of a challenge, but you know, you do one or two, and pretty soon it's like riding a bike. So that was about an hour of work. Here's another problem. Out of nowhere, my signal would just disappear. It would just cut off. And by moving the rig around, it would come back. And I found out that my crystal switchboard here, it's got a little intermittent problem on the switch. I've seen this a lot. So I'll show you what I'm gonna do to fix that. This is a parts rig, and I'm gonna steal an idea that I see on here. Look, somebody took a solder lug and they soldered the ground foil to the lug and then screwed the lug down to the chassis. Let's do that. Okay, that was my first CW QSO. Okay, got the cover on the RF cage and time to put the cabinet on. I found this one in my collection. It's not bad. It's got a few scratches, but looks pretty good actually. I always get a little nervous putting the cabinet on because that's usually when the rig decides it wants to spring one more surprise on me, and then I gotta take the cabinet off again. I was looking for a back panel because the one on there had a cutout, and noticing how many of my back panels had cutouts, and I don't know why I hold on to them. Here they cut out to let the heat out from the wire one resistors on the audio board. There's a cutout for the finals, another cutout for the finals. Here's a cutout for both of them. Thankfully, I've got one that's not cut out, and I'm going to use it. Looks pretty good, but I am going to leave the screws out until I get it on the air and try it out. Because I think, I don't know, I want to be optimistic, but these things always spring surprises on me as soon as they feel that cabinet come down. This edge right here looks like a really good candidate for touch-up paint. I had some of this made up and I sell it on eBay. I only use touch-up paint sparingly. Places like that edge, I would not put touch-up paint like right here, because you cannot perfectly match the color of these cabinets no matter what. they change the colors from year to year, and then you've got to take into account sun bleaching and whatnot. But for something like this, touch-up paint's really good. All right, now that it's working, I'm going to run through band by band and just show the output. We are starting at 80 meters, going over to 40 meters, and about 95 watts, which is within range. Oh, there we go, about 100 watts. Now 20 meters, full output. Going to 15 meters, and about 95 watts. I've got some SWR on that dummy load, so. And now we get into the upper bands that have a little less output. Should get about 85. And once again, I've got SWR there, but yeah, right about 85. And I should point out, really nice smooth tuning. That took a little work, had to pull the VFO, but it definitely paid off. Let's see if we can make some contacts.
Later, 73. CQ POTA K5SAS at Park US 3509 or South Texas, CQ POTA.
November 5, Oscar Lima Alpha.
November 5, Oscar Lima Alpha. You're blowing my headphones off. You're local, aren't you?
That's right. You're almost 40 over 9 here in South Padre Island. Over.
Copy the 40 over. I'm sitting here at the lighthouse trying to do it to it. You know where I'm at?
Well, you're about, I'd say, 5 miles away.
Wow, doing it to it. All right, Bill, appreciate you picking me up. Are you here on the mainland, or are you across the pond on the island?
I am on South Padre Island, and I had no idea anyone was using the lighthouse for a POTA. I wonder if I could just pop over and say hi.
Sure, I'll be here for about an hour. I'm going to try to pick up at least a
Well, that
minimum.
was fun. God. I'm amazed that my signal didn't just bounce right over him and vice versa. All right, let's go meet this guy. We never get any POTA down here in South Texas, so I'm kind of excited to meet this guy. 4 miles away as the crow flies. Crazy. And that is Port Isabel on the mainland. And that's the Port Isabel Lighthouse, which is a state park. That's our guy right there.
POTA K5SAS at US 3509 CQ POTA.
Well, that was fun. I really enjoyed that restoration most of the time. We had some challenges. We had some challenges in the switchboards on the underside. A lot of problems with those. There are problems I didn't even cover on the video because I just got so down in the weeds. But anyway, variations on a theme. Bad contacts, bad connections. Those are the things you look for. And of course, your guide must be the Heathkit manual. The manual will take you step by step through the alignment process. It's got a great troubleshooting section. That's why I work on Heathkits, because of those manuals. They're so good. Anyway, we're going to do it again. Find another one of these to play with and maybe make another video. So thanks for coming along. 73.